Good evening, welcome to the Town of Basalt Planning and Zoning meeting for September 5th. Can we have a call to order? Roll call, that's the word. Thank you, Rob.
Yep. Bill Marin.
Yo.
Kyle Oberketter.
Here.
Eric Vozek.
Here.
Rob Levitt.
Yes.
Cindy Hirschfield. Here. Katie Hostetler is absent. Mike Horvath.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. First order of business is to approve the minutes from June 6th of this year. Do we have any comments, questions, concerns, changes?
I do want to say, I appreciate the brevity of the minutes. That makes it a lot easier to go through. But I will make a motion to approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Cindy seconds. All in favor?
Thank you.
I abstain since I was not here.
Thank you. Excellent. And the primary item tonight is a public hearing on the Jadwin Black Mountain PUD sketch plan application and associated land use requests. Michelle, is that you?
It's going to be James.
James, okay.
Let me share my screen here, just a quick second.
Hey, Kyle. Are you tall enough to reach those handles?
Reach what?
I am not.
The
The
handles.
little red handles on the bottom of that TV. Thanks. If you just pull it down. Yeah, and then you might be able to see that better than,
Thank you.
I can see that one, so
yeah,
good.
okay. Thanks, sorry.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing on an application submitted by Jadwin Park LLC, requesting annexation, sketch plan PUD, and associated land use actions to construct 68 residential multifamily units, 12 short-term rental cabins, and 7 glamping pads with tents on property known as the Jadwin property, which is located at 431 Emma Road. The subject property is about 9 acres of property. It's located between the post office and the wastewater treatment plant on Emma Road. You can see it here. Here is the post office. The wastewater treatment plant is to the west, and it's located off of Emma Road. And currently contains a single-family residence, which you see here, as well as a mobile home on what's called the Dogleg property, as well as some outbuildings. It is partially in Pickton County on the southern portion of it, and partially in Eagle County on the northern aspect of it. And the majority of the property, including all of the portion that's proposed to be developed by the applicant, is within the urban growth boundary. The portion known as the Dogleg in prior reviews along Emma Road is proposed to be dedicated by the applicant to the town for community benefiting use, but it is outside the urban growth boundary. You see the urban growth boundary running right here. The property also has mapped wetlands, including a pond, which P&Z saw at the site visit that P&Z conducted of the property. And the future land use map in the master plan includes medium-density residential on a portion of the property. It includes short-term rental hotel, and then it also includes community facility in blue there. This is the property boundary. This is the adjacent property known as the Stott property to the east. And then on the future land use map, also on a portion of the property closest to the river, it's designated as open space and recreation. The proposal is to construct 68 multifamily dwelling units, which are to consist of a mix of townhomes and rental apartments on the kind of southeast quadrant of the property, everything in yellow. And then the applicant has also proposed 12 short-term rental cabins, which are proposed here in purple. And they're including an amenity cabin as well as a dwelling unit for an on-site manager in that area. And then they've also proposed 7 glamping sites that are proposed to contain glamping pads that will have tents associated with them. And then roughly 1/3 of the property on the northern aspect of the property is proposed to be recreation open space in the application. And they've proposed to provide public amenities in this portion, as well as a trail to the river from public parking, so that the public would have access to the river as well as the pond for fishing. The dogleg piece of the property, as I noted, is located over here to the west along Emmer Road, and it's proposed to be dedicated to the town for a community benefiting use to be determined by the town. The review process for this application includes a PUD, which requires 3 rounds of review by the P&Z and the town council. There would be a sketch plan, a preliminary plan, and a final plan application. We're in the sketch plan phase currently, and it's as it sounds. The sketch plan phase is really a review to determine if the concept plan that's proposed by the applicants is feasible and desirable. And then if a sketch plan were to be approved, then the preliminary and final plan reviews would get more detailed on the application. As it is also an annexation request, annexation wouldn't occur until directly before a final development plan were to be approved, which is pursuant to the town's policy on annexation. So this evening, staff would suggest hearing an introduction to the discussion items that have been identified by staff, hearing applicant comments, which will include a recap of the proposal, since a portion of the P&Z was not able to attend the joint meeting. And then staff would recommend asking questions of staff and the applicant related to the application, taking public comments because it is a public hearing, and then providing initial P&Z discussion. And then ultimately, this evening, staff would recommend continuing the public hearing to the next meeting, which would be September 19th. Staff will provide draft conditions at a future meeting for consideration. So to begin with, in terms of the discussion items, we've included them in your staff memo. The first being the consistency of the land use with the master plan. As we noted, a portion of the site to be annexed and developed by the applicant is within the urban growth boundary. Here is the urban growth boundary. And future land uses in the master plan for the site include residential in the yellow portion. They include short-term rental and hotel in the purple portion. As you see, it lines up with the future land use map. And then also community facility is included, and the applicants are proposing to dedicate the property, which is known as the dogleg, which is a 0.84 acre parcel, to the town for community benefiting use. And then the future land use map also includes recreation open space on the northern aspect of it, and the applicant has proposed to provide open space on that northern aspect of the property. So as we discussed, the applicant's proposal lines up pretty well with the future land use map, except that the applicants have proposed to take this community facility and kind of push it over on the Dog Lake property, and we'll discuss that further here in a second. The master plan allows for site-specific adjustments where they are determined to be consistent with the intent of the map and other goals and objectives of the master plan. Other discussion topics include the consistency of the density with the master plan. The master plan lumps the Jadwin property together with the property to the east, which is known as the Stotts property, into one primary parcel known as the Jadwin-Stott primary parcel is what it's called. It provides for a density range of between 80 and 180 dwelling units on the two properties combined. The Jadwin property is, as I noted, the only property that's proposed for development at this time, and the adjacent stop property does not have a development application. 68 dwelling units proposed, and the 12 short-term rental cabins are within the density range proposed on the Jadwin stop parcel. There are a series of improvement requirements that go along with a density of 80 units on the property. They include improvements to the slip lane intersection with Emma Road, as well as improvements to the Midland Avenue Emma Road intersection, which is down by the post office. And then it also includes requirements for trail enhancements and trail connections to Old Town Basalt. It also includes the requirement for the child care facility, and then providing for 2 times the open space requirements. It requires protection of the wetlands, and then it also requires minimum 25% affordable housing per the current housing guidelines in the town code. And then it also includes annexation requirements that are typically required by the town, such as providing a green initiatives fee, a child care development fee, and a voluntary real estate transfer assessment, which town has required on many annexations and PUDs in the past. So the proposal satisfies the requirement of connecting the property to the trail by the post office. Sorry, the computer is frozen. There we go. In that the applicant is proposing a separated trail from Emma Road that would connect to the trail by the post office. It provides the recreation open space as required at 2 times the town code requirement, in that they're providing the recreation open space on the northern 1/3 of the property with a public trail access to the river, as well as public amenities in that area. And they've proposed to provide more than the 25% affordable housing requirement in the town code. They've proposed to preserve the wetlands around the pond area as well as the pond. And staff would anticipate providing draft conditions that would be included related to requiring the fees that are in the master plan as well as the transfer assessment. So staff will discuss a couple of the topics, the child care facility as well as the transportation system improvements as part of the presentation shortly. The master plan also includes a series of design principles for constructing the density on the property. These were included in your staff memo. They include compliance with the neighborhood mixed density typology that's in the master plan. It indicates that large and medium lot sizes for single-family use is highly discouraged on the site. It also indicates that smaller building sizes at the western edge are preferred so that they transition from town near the post office into smaller buildings as you get west into kind of the rural buffer. And then there's discussion of live-work, which is more identified for the Stott parcel to the east than it is the Jadwin parcel. And then it also identifies that the hotel short-term rental aspect of the property should include very small-scale and low-impact buildings. And so, as is shown in the application, the applicant is proposing to step down from the east, where you've got 3-story buildings, to the west. This is from looking at the property at Highway 82, and the applicants can go into more detail. But then they also step down further to the short-term rental cabins in that they're 1-story cabins. Staff believes that there'll probably need to be massing adjustments and architectural detailing that will be encouraged as you go into further into the process, and they'll make progress on those in the review process. Other topics include the transportation system improvements and traffic. The applicant has provided a traffic study that's in your packet. It starts on page 94 of your packet. It indicates that there would be an acceptable level of service at the intersections that we just pointed out with the development, and they recommend no improvements would be needed at this intersection as a result of the development. But staff has had Charlier and Associates out of Denver, who's a traffic engineer that the town has used in the past, do a third-party analysis of the traffic study. And Charlier believed that there was some technical aspects of the report that needed adjustments, and so the applicants are looking at those technical aspects. Charlier didn't believe that the technical adjustments would change the conclusions related to level of service, however. So the applicants are revising that traffic study and will provide that prior to the next P&Z meeting. Charlier did believe that a dedicated right turn lane on down valley traffic on Emmer Road at the intersection of Midland Avenue and Emmer Road would be a good improvement that would help limit the queuing issues at the intersection, because you would have more traffic going straight across that intersection than you have today with the development. So the applicants are looking at that and working on a design for that, and they're going to do a cost estimate as well prior to the next P&Z meeting so that we can look at that. Additionally, Charlier felt that there needed to be improvements to the intersection of the slip lane with the Highway 82 and Emmer Road intersection at this point. Also, the fire district thought that there was a need for improvements to that intersection as well. And they did a field study with one of their aerial trucks that they brought out and did the turning radius. And it was evident that there needed to be some changes to the geometry of that intersection to make it work. And so the applicant's engineers are also working on a design for that intersection and a cost estimate for review by the P&Z at a future meeting. Charlier also recommended that there be a transportation demand management plan provided by the applicant to help alleviate traffic and ensure multimodal aspects that are called out in the traffic study are adhered to. And so Charlier has highlighted a future connection, which is in the master plan between the Gisela Way and the Jadwin property through the stop property, that's a important future connection if the stop property ever redevelops. And so he's suggested that the applicants look at putting up financial security to help ensure that that happens in the future if the stop property is ever redeveloped. So staff will bring that back as discussion related to that topic when we have the conditions of approval proposed. But generally, the transportation improvements are being designed for those two intersections, and we'll bring them back at a future meeting. Other topics include the affordable housing. The applicants have proposed for 24 out of the 68 units to be deed restricted at a Category 2 level. That represents 35% of the total units, and then 27% of the total square footage is proposed to be deed restricted. And they're proposed to be at a Category 2 level that is called out by the code, which is affordable to individuals and families making 100% of the area median income in Basalt. The Basalt Affordable Community Housing Committee, BAC, has started their review but has not completed it at this point. Staff recommends reserving most of the P&Z's discussion on the topic until you've heard the BAC recommendations, and we should have those for the second P&Z meeting. Other topics include the public land daycare discussion item that's in your packet. As was noted, the master plan requires and calls for a daycare to be built. If you're going to develop 80 units on the site, the applicants instead have proposed to dedicate this .84 acre parcel known as the dogleg to the town for community benefiting uses to be determined by the town. The applicants have expressed that they have proposed to put it out here on the dogleg instead of incorporate it into the development because there's a main sewer line, and you can see it here, running through the property, and it's the main sewer line into town. So they can't move that or change that, and so the community facility is on top of that in the master plan. As well as they wanted to separate out the traffic for the community facility from that of the traffic to the residential and short-term rental uses, which makes sense to staff. However, staff feels that if the town is willing to accept that concept, that the applicant needs to apply for a master plan amendment as part of the preliminary plan application. Additionally, the applicants have proposed not to do the core and shell like was done at Stotts Mill for the daycare. So staff does believe that if the town is willing to consider that, that we would need the applicants to do a appraisal of this property to be able to compare it to the value of the core and shell that we would get, in that the Stotts Mill core and shell for a daycare was around $2 million on the building permit. So staff was suggesting that that should be done before preliminary plan application. Other topics that were included the pedestrian bridge. A pedestrian bridge was desired to the river park from this property in the master plan when it was done in 2020. The master plan includes a requirement for a pedestrian bridge if the Jadwin Stott primary parcels were developed to exceed 80 units. Since the adoption of the master plan in 2020, the applicant's engineering company, Sopris Engineer, has evaluated this topic, and they would believe that it would require starting the bridge structure back out of the floodplain. So you couldn't actually start the bridge up here on the riverfront area of the property. It would have to be started back behind the floodway. And that being the case, it would have a significant span far beyond what was originally anticipated. The staff recommends that the town have a third-party engineer look at those conclusions that Sopris has provided before preliminary plan application if P&Z and council are interested in a bridge at that location. Other topics included in the draft memo includes the parking and police department comments. The applicants proposed to meet the town code parking requirements in providing surface parking for the multifamily buildings adjacent to the buildings, as well as to provide surface garages for the townhome units. They've also proposed to provide a common parking lot that would serve the short-term rental units as well as the glamping sites closer to the river. And the police department was concerned that there would be more parking demand for the short-term rental than the parking that's being supplied. The applicants have responded by proposing to limit cars through rental agreements, as well as to have an on-site manager for 24/7 to enforce those on-site management issues. Staff in the police department have asked the applicant to provide a site management plan for the short-term rental uses that would address the parking management, the quiet hours for the short-term rental, as well as what type of recreation is permitted on the pond for evaluation by staff in the P&Z. The applicants are working on that and working on to provide it before the next meeting. Other topics that are included in your staff memo include the open space and trails topic. As was noted, the applicants have proposed for about a third of the property to be an open space recreation amenity with soft surface trails coming from both the short-term rental and glamping area to the river, as well as public amenities over here associated with the public parking, as well as a trail to make its way up to the river for the public access as well. So private access is proposed on the west side and public access is proposed on the east side. They've also proposed to have some of the glamping sites adjacent to the river in kind of this finger parcel that comes up. Eagle County has provided comments recommending no glamping pads in the 100-year floodplain and that wildlife corridors not be disturbed as part of the application. Staff has further conducted a site walk with Rick LaFaro, the Roaring Fork Conservancy, to get a more detailed evaluation on the site. And so LaFaro has expressed that the area to the northeast of the pond, which is located right in this area, is a good example of a functioning undisturbed wetland area, and that area should be undisturbed. He also suggested that the trails to the river should be field fit in areas that are already disturbed. And he suggested that a 40 to 50 foot buffer be provided from the river so you don't have glamping in that 40 to 50 foot buffer from the river. He's also recommended that instead of having kind of these deck areas, and you can't see them because the zoom is on top of it, that are proposed, that instead you have rock steps similar to what's in the river park in terms of access to the river and ability for people to set out chairs. He thinks that they work well. And then finally, in the site walk, he found some rare orchids that are called Ute Lady's Tress in the pasture to the north of the pond. And so he also suggested field fitting some of the glamping sites as well as the trails around those areas of orchids so that they remain undisturbed as well. Other parks and open space and trails topics included that Pickens County has suggested the potential to look at a landscape buffer between Emma Road and the development. And they proposed this for two reasons. One, to try and lessen the highway noise for the residential, and also to act as a visual aesthetic buffer from the highway for the residential piece. The post committee is reviewing the application before your second meeting. We'll provide more detailed recommendations. Other topics included the floodplain. Portion of the site is in the floodplain. The Colorado Water Conservancy Board is in the process of changing the floodplain on the property. As has been recommended by the town's hydrologist, who is Robert Crable of Matrix Design. Robert recommended the change to the Water Conservation Board, and staff expects to include a draft condition for P&Z's consideration that would require that change to the floodplain before preliminary plan application were to be submitted. And finally, other topics, green building. The applicant is proposing all-electric development, and staff also anticipates requiring consistency and compliance with the sustainable building regulations as well as the wildfire mitigation regulations that are in place at the time of permits to be submitted. So once again this evening, staff would recommend hearing additional comments and kind of a recap of the proposal from the applicants, and then taking questions from the commission to staff and the applicants, and then taking public comments as it is a public hearing, and then providing initial comments from P&Z on the various topics that were outlined. staff would suggest that if P&Z knows of additional information that you need that staff hasn't covered for the next meeting, that would be helpful to staff and the applicant as well. So we do have the applicant team here this evening. We've got Bridger and Coulter Smith representing the applicant group. And, they can introduce their team.
Gentlemen, feel
Guys,
free,
yeah, please.
Floor is yours.
Sure.
All right. You guys hear us okay?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to try not, well, I guess a few of you weren't here, so I'll try to be as concise as possible. We bought the property, we actually became interested in the property in 2018.
I don't think I can start the slideshow. Sorry, a little technical difficulty. Oh, there we go. Still not an option to use that feature.
Do you want me to share it? I've got it up, and you just tell me when to.
Well, I'm going to try to do that one more time, and I'll just do the... Try to let me in one more time.
Sure.
Kind of scroll at our own pace.
You have to make a panelist.
I guess I'll unmute.
I'll try.
Okay, I'm on as panelist.
Recording in progress.
All right, technical difficulties over. And we'll start afresh. Thank you, guys.
There you go.
There you go.
All right, so like I was saying, we became interested in the property in 2018, and we put it under contract. We weren't in a huge rush to start working on the design. We wanted to understand the property really well first, and we also knew that the town was going through revising the master plan, and that they had selected this as one of the primary parcels. So we were very involved, and we went to a lot of the different design charrette meetings. So we were listening to what the community was saying. We were watching those meetings. So really, go to the next slide. So the first thing we knew, just like the town, the reason they've selected as a primary parcel is this is an amazing location for a development like this. We've got great access to the bus. It's about 1,600 feet to walk to the bus from the site. We've got great access to downtown. You can walk, you can bike to downtown. You've got the post office, you've got the library. You can jump on the trail system and head down valley or up valley. And then one of the biggest benefits, of course, one of the biggest amenities is that river right there. So that's huge, and that's something that we noticed right away. But at the same time, the site has some drawbacks. So we have a water table that's really close. It's about 36 inches when you dig down. And then you have the noise of the highway on the site. So we looked at those different factors, and then we also looked at the site constraints related to the utilities. Go to the next. So the utilities and the wetlands and the flood zone. So on this map, you can see that the dark red is the sewer that comes across from the northeast diagonally, and then it cuts south there. That's the main sewer line. And then we've got a Holy Cross electric line, which we've been working with them, and they're willing to shift that electric line over so it goes above the existing ditch, and then it will pivot back in alignment with the existing line. They can't put that underground because it's one of the primary power lines. But the good news is that they are willing to shift it over, which helps us tremendously. Then the green line on here is the wetlands line. So pretty much anything north of there, anything to the west of that, we can't touch. And we don't really want to touch it. It's beautiful. So we took those into consideration. We took the location, and then we really dove into the guidelines of the master plan. That's the next slide. And that's where we started to come up with, okay, where does it make sense to put the residential? Obviously, we know we're proposing to put these fishing cabins, but we really couldn't get our heads around the community facility portion of it. It was very difficult. I went to a Zoom meeting with the Child Care Coalition, and what I quickly learned is that it's hard. They don't all agree on the size of a child care facility. How many kids? Where's the funding going to come through? All the things that you guys have been dealing with a lot. So we went back and forth, and we really couldn't figure out how to solve this issue until we came up with the idea that maybe the dog leg, gifting that, would be the best option. It allows really good access to Emma Road where it doesn't impact our neighbors. You can have your own direct access into the property, and then you can come up with your own size for a future facility if that's desired. And so that was our creative way of looking at this. So really looking at those constraints, the location of this site, and then this guideline of the master plan is what allowed us to, what we think is get really creative here. And so taking all those into consideration, and then the noise and the river amenity, we also felt like this site is the perfect location for missing middle housing, workforce housing. So the density of these units and the size of the units and the way they're laid out, it's really geared towards that. And that's why we have 35% affordable. But not just that affordable, the townhomes as well are smaller. They're intentionally smaller. They're geared towards the higher end of the missing middle. So I think as we go further, you guys will see that and it'll come out more and more. Yeah, this is just, I really like this image. It shows the proximity to the bus stop, to downtown. It shows the on-ramp and then the river. I think it's the best image we have that shows the proximity of this site as it relates to Stott and the library and then downtown.
Okay, well, thanks, Richard. So now I'd like to focus on the proposed elements of the design. But first I want to touch on some guiding principles, and obviously these are snippets that pull directly from the 2020 master plan. And I just want to kind of go over some of the goals, the development that Bridger had as a developer, and as when the architecture team came to join the project we had as well. But that was the first thing we did, was really look at the master plan and try to use it as a guide. And obviously in these snippets you can see that the community at large during shredding and during work sessions and all the public outreach really understood the constraints that we're dealing with in this parcel, and that was pulled out easily. Over here, this map that you've seen a few times, you'll probably see a couple more before we're done, really kind of shows you the intended land use that was pulled out of that charrette. And in this particular diagram, the Stott parcel is kind of not, it's kind of backwashed here, so you can really focus on the Jadwin parcel and what elements were really related to that in the master plan. And obviously that kind of led to some of the underlying zoning that we're going for. And then the yellow area here with the residential, where R4MD is what we think is the appropriate with the language we read for that zoning underlayment, and then C1 for the purple area, which we can get into a little bit later. And then obviously the density range, James mentioned that, Bridger mentioned that. The range that was in there really helped guide us to say, okay, if we really need to hit something between these two, but also take into account that these numbers represent both the Jadwin and the Stott parcel, and sort of figure out, let's kind of look at how we can have a mix of uses on the property and a mix of residential types, and start to approach these numbers in a meaningful way that kind of represents the intentions of the community. And then this graph here is the last thing I wanted to show on this particular slide. It kind of shows you that the things that pulled out of community sessions that were supported for this parcel, affordable housing, single family, multifamily, recreational and camping, and agricultural and open space. And so as you look at our proposal, hopefully you can identify those elements in there and see where we originally came up with these ideas from. And then this idea of a density instead of sprawl. which really speaks to the need for more housing in the community, and was part of our proposal. So the next slide here I want to get into is more of the goals. And this has to do with the type of housing, being reflective of the diverse Basalt community. And what we really want to do here is make sure that we're representing all the values and all the types of residences in the town. And it really is a diverse place, and we want to provide housing at different sort of income brackets and different levels within the community, and really have sort of the same melting pot that the town is, and that you see around town and in all the other boroughs in this community. The next item here is the goal of leaning into what the site has to offer. Bridger obviously already mentioned this. Some of it's pretty obvious, but obviously we have a very great opportunity to tie into the RTD transit station that is at the edge of 82. At that location, you have WeCycle stations that then furthers the alternative transportation options. And on our proposed property, we intend to have the opportunity for a WeCycle station or something of that amenity to kind of connect that link between the two. Also leading into the site, obviously the idea of, taking a nature bath, enjoying the outdoors, really kind of having that quality of life that everyone loves about Basalt. We feel like is an amenity that is at our fingertips at the north, and we want to sort of make accessible to the residents. And then, of course, as mentioned already tonight, dealing with the highway noise, figuring out attractive and creative ways to address that, and do so in a way that allows the living environment to be more pleasant. This slide here kind of goes back to understanding the context, and some things that James mentioned, that that in the master plan and the early studies and the thinking of the town have been that we really want to step down the massing towards the county lands to the west. And really it's an idea of starting from the center core of town, where a lot of built out environments are, where the civic buildings are, and making sure that as we move towards the county open parcels and less dense development, that we are really respecting that and sort of stepping down the urban appearance in height and in density, and in sort of just the use of that land being lower impact as you move that direction. So then this next slide here really is just the overall map of the development in general. And I'm just going to walk you through some of the individual buildings that are part of the proposal before we take a look at the elevations and floor plans of each of them. So right here in the front, M1 and M2, this is your sort of project provided community housing asset that we're proposing here. It's two 12 plexes consisting of 24 units. It's 2 stories. It's a mix of studios, 1 beds and 3 beds. And it's surrounded by parking, really close to where we're trying to have the WeCycle station. It's close to the proximity to get into town. It has a lot of great assets for it. And then next to that, we have M3 and M4, which are very similar architectural types, but they've been changed for the character and make it a more dynamic community. Those are both 3-story buildings, which obviously with that we get more units, and so they become both 16 plexes, and they kind of show at this edge of the stop parcel. Behind that, we have a mix of 2 types of townhomes that are either in single-family standard arrangement or as in duplexes, but are really meant to have a row home appearance. And they're tight parcels. They're meant for efficiency, but also for quality spaces which allow for tuck-under garage parking. Then moving over to the left, we have this commercial amenity, this vibrancy element, this piece to add to the tourism element of Basalt, and this fishing cabin village here that has 12 rooms available in it. And then I guess I should mention once again the open space component up here, which we can talk about more later, and the intended gift to the community over here. So now looking at the M1 and M2 type structures here. Obviously, we have a studio, a 1-bed, and a 3-bed, and we jumped right over the option of a 2-bed. The idea here is that, you know, we're trying to fill the void in the housing opportunity, moving away from the common development model of 2 bedrooms in response to the need for families to have, you know, larger units with 3 bedrooms in them and spaces for a family to thrive and live. And complementary to that, places for singles and people that want to live on their own at different tiers of sort of affordability. And, you know, places for people to call their own in the town. And then the architectural style down here, you can see we have solar panels facing south, interior sort of common covered areas that are exterior but covered as the main entry area, and then a nice architectural language that we feel is appealing. And then the M3 and M4 product type here really is the same floor planning as the other ones, kind of putting everyone on the same playing field, from the affordable housing to the free market. And a few things to talk about at both of these is some of the quality goals we had. Both these products here, we wanted to have 9-foot ceilings as a quality standard for the project, and that does a lot of great things. Obviously, it becomes very important with internalized units where you need to bring natural light deep into the space. It helps with internal ventilation and the ability for ceiling fans, and also where you need to have mechanical and other related drops. You really don't have to go below the 8-foot mark in any of the spaces, and that was really done just purely from a quality standpoint. Also, all the units, the M1, M2, and M3 and M4, have private outdoor spaces. We've incorporated interior bicycle storage, both for e-bikes and pedal bikes, as well as all the bulk storage components that are necessary for apartments and community housing buildings. And then, of course, the connection to the bus stop and the outdoor spaces in the open space. Moving on to the townhomes, as Bridger described these, they are really just a slightly higher level of unit, but they are still compact and more modest than sort of luxury products out there. And the idea here was to really go for density over sprawl, but also allow for duplexes and some that are standing by their own, and not have any of these units be sandwiched in on both sides. So there was opportunity for 3 sides of glass and openness on all of these. Another nice amenity of this is making sure that they all have tucked under and covered garages that allow us to get more cars off the street, have less asphalt in the development, and cover that parking with a living space. The sizes of these units range from 1,800 to 2,000 square feet, so they're certainly within that middle size of a 3-bedroom unit. I guess that's it for that particular topic. And now moving on to this site section that you've seen before. James took a moment to talk about this one, but this is from Emma Road and Highway 82, looking at the site to the north. And this section right here is looking from the Stott parcel towards the Jadwin parcel, from the east to the west. And at this slide, I just kind of want to go into a few elements of the green initiatives that we're proud to sort of share with you tonight. The first just has to do with the site design and how we really tried to strive for density and compact units and limit the envelope of the units, to make them less consumptive, I'll say, We also added a number of electric vehicle parking spaces sprinkled around the development. The e-bike component we've talked about a couple times already. We also have a lot of pedal bike parking areas available on the site. And then, of course, the transit proximity. But then when you zoom into the actual buildings themselves, some of the elements are obviously localized electric-based heating and cooling with rooftop heat, air-to-air heat exchange, heating and cooling, as well as the PV arrays, which we intend to have on every building, creating it for that full electric cycle of comfort and sustainability. And then the last element of that is really just solar tempering and making sure that when we do provide the glazing areas, we're doing so in a way that we're picking out the right glazing with the right films and trying to tuck in some of these areas in ways that keep the buildings cool. So this next slide here gets into the quantity of affordable housing, category 2, community housing. And looking at this as a whole at the 68 units, 14 would be the required community housing by code. Obviously, carving out 10 more is a fairly attractive addition. This proposal here really wanted to take what was seen as the 14 required and pushed as far as we could with pro forma and with a business plan that seemed achievable to up that as much as possible, and with adding another 10 units, we're nearly doubling that opportunity for community housing for the town of Basalt. And then over to your right here, this was an important slide for me to add in here, and just kind of acknowledging that BOC does have some recently amended standards for quality housing and livability. And we are cognizant of those. We use those in our design. We're making sure that we're hitting or exceeding all of those standards in all of our buildings. So that is that, and I'm going to let Bridger talk a little bit about the fishing cabins.
All right, so so you guys can see on the right side of this image here, this is the general area of the fishing cabin. The goal here is that we're really not trying to touch anything to the north of the wetlands, and keeping that all as is. Have a nice and to have a nice pathway to the river to access that. We have proposed to include 7 glamping pads, which would be seasonal, so they would only be up July, August, July through October, 4 months out of the year. The rest of the time, it would be as if they were not on the site. So you would not even know they existed in the wintertime. We really spent time looking at the cabins and how they can sort of work with the edge of the wetlands and making sure that they can feel small and charming, and then also making sure the noise is pushed inward and to the northeast away from our neighbors to the west. That was a big thing. So all of the fishing cabins, all of their decks, the ones on the east side, the decks are actually on the west side of the fishing cabins. So no one can actually hang out on the side where our neighbors are. So that was something really important. You can tell by the size of them, they're very small, so that falls right in line with the guidelines in the master plan. And they're sort of elegantly, sort of separated on the site. So it makes it kind of nice and attractive when you're walking and when you park there. And really the goal at the end of the day is that this feels, when you arrive, like a completely separate development from the residential. They want to feel completely separate. And that pond allows us to do that, along with changing the surface materials, changing the landscaping, having good signage. All of those things we're really aware of. And we want to do a really good job of making that obvious. So these are just some other images. The one on the lower right to the left is the amenity elevation. So really simple. The idea there is that someone, if they showed up and their cabin wasn't ready, let's say they showed up at noon and it was available at 3, there's a place for them to go and sit and relax, a place where they could read. We might look at having things like a little pantry bar where you can have coffee in the morning, you can have croissants. Keep it really simple though. The idea is to have it low overhead. We would have a full-time on-site manager to make sure that the noise is respected, the parking is respected. that it's run really well, and in trying to attract the type of clients that want to come here, that are maybe visiting family in the town of Basalt, visiting friends, or working for RMI, and they want to have a place that's low-key and that's quiet. That's our goal.
Stand here, it makes for a quick escape if I need to. Okay, so a lot of items have been mentioned around the site plan itself. So I'll probably do my best to really just actually dive into the details of that and then the landscape itself. James, do you still have your pointy thing?
Yeah, sure. There you go. Just the middle button.
Okay. So we can go to the next slide.
Sure.
So for us, I think the message you guys have already received is how much of this site becomes not usable for buildings, parking, more intense development, and how much we get to reserve to do a lot more of the open space and recreation and things like that. But for us, as we looked at the site plan, it also started to kind of break itself into these 4 different areas that we wanted to think about very differently. So area number 1 was our most intense development. It was our highest density. It also has this kind of town center grid feel to it. So we really wanted to capture that in the landscape and celebrate that, and do that in a couple of different ways. One, we're obviously dealing with a lot of entry opportunities with our sound mitigation, how people are going to circulate into the site. So a lot of details still to be determined, but we're looking at buffering both between Emma and 82, what those opportunities might be, and then between Emma and our development. So this is going to be everything from integrating the public trail access and better public trail along Emma with sound mitigation, with some of the buffering for even the buildings themselves, et cetera, and trying to do that in some pretty limited spaces. So there's going to be a lot of really interesting design with that, but we're looking at being able to use fencing, vegetation, the trail itself, et cetera. And then as you get into the site, for us, we really took advantage of this idea of a gridded streetscape, and so we want kind of trees that are going to work their way into the site, maybe in a more regular pattern, bring shade, bring a little bit of relief to our surface parking areas. We can't go underground. We know that, we've talked about that. So how can we help mitigate that? We're also carving out these spaces, Ramsey mentioned, in between the buildings. So those are going to be our spaces for bike storage, covered bikes, things like that, all the amenities for our residents of the space. But then a lot of these are still going to be welcoming the public. So both this entrance, let's say here, we've got some public parking. We'll talk about that in a second as we get to like number 4, but we've got some public parking here. This is our access. It then goes all the way through the stop parcel, through to the library. So, we have public that are kind of interacting with this site. So that's number 1, celebrate this kind of town center feel to it. Number 2, now our buildings are starting to get smaller. We're starting to reduce our density a little bit. We're using number 2 as a little bit of a transition space in the landscape. Our open spaces and the private spaces for each resident get a little bit bigger. We're going to take advantage of that. We want the treescape to start to, naturalize a little bit more, so it transitions into area 3 and 4. And then you're going to transition into this public amenity space that we'll talk about in just a minute as well. One other thing to note, we've had our technical team review how we're accessing from a fire perspective. So we're taking advantage of these utility corridors that we have, and this is going to be our fire access. For us, however, we despise when something has one use and one use only. So we're going to turn those into kind of a plaza space. So they'll be pedestrian oriented with markers to show where the fire lane is, and then marked off. So it shows no private vehicles, fire lane only. However, all the fire trucks can get through there. So they requested no bollards, but we'll have really clear marking. So this entire area right here, between 2 and 3, so this plaza space, and then this is the amenity building that Bridger was mentioning. So this entire little space becomes kind of this transition. It's like a clear area where you move from residential to the short term and the fishing cabins and that whole like hotel type space, okay? So all of that kind of happens here. And then you get into number 3. So now you're in the fishing cabin area, and we really start to naturalize things. So, you know, we're even talking about just paving where we have to, and then really doing like a lot of the crusher fines, something much softer for people to then circulate right to their cabins. They're gonna walk to those, so they're gonna park and they're gonna walk a little ways to their cabins. We're gonna have little gathering areas, et cetera. Again, still like working on that very light touch on the land. And then you can see, Bridger mentioned this, but like this whole area, and even to Rick LaFaro's comments, like really this will remain pretty much untouched. And if anything, we might enhance a little bit of planting, bring in some understory, but leaving that as this very natural buffer area, okay? So then you start to transition into kind of the edge of number 3, which is our glamping pads, and then number 4, which is our very naturalized areas. So we'll talk about this area between 2 and 4. So this is where we've developed a little bit more of the outdoor amenity space for residents. Also, the public can circulate to this area. We have a couple of images that we'll show. We think we want this to just really be a bit open, flexible, have a combination of, say, crusher fines and some landscape. It might have a small outdoor kitchen area, you know, things that we can locate outside the floodplain. And then this is where some game areas, you know, things like that. This is where then we transition and the public trails begin out into area number 4. So the idea is to continue this light touch on the land, especially as you get out into number 4. We have some weed mitigation to do. We found out about the orchids, so absolutely field fitting. Like, we're super excited about that. We would love that. Areas where we might need to elevate and do some boardwalk. The rest, I think, has a feel like what you see in the river park down on the river's edge. And then over on the glamping side, again, a very similar touch. So the idea is to have very easy trails, small, enough that we're working with exactly what that size would be for EMS, but these are not vehicular. No cars are basically going past this point in area number 3. And so this is all walkable. Now, deciding on what that final surfacing, it might just be a little open pad, like where we have shade sails in the river park. And so that would be an open crusher fines pad. Small glamping tent structure is erected for 4 months out of the year and then disappears. And again, leaving a ton of buffer space through here. There's a lot of vegetation there. So we really see this whole kind of finger of land being just a little bit of selective removal. Some of it might need to happen. And then that's where we're kind of tucking in these spaces. So the idea is this finger is really separated. The left-hand side is the quiet glamping spaces. The right-hand side is where we still provide public access. So someone can come in, they can park here, they can circulate to our trails, and then all the way down to the river's edge. Go to the next slide. So this provides a couple of the images of this idea of a light touch on the land. So that I think in graphic representation, it looked like, you know, more like decking and things like that. So we love the idea of moving more towards some rock spaces, you know, just very natural. Maybe we do a little bit that might be elevated like we've done over in Gisela Few Park in Midland. So things that can kind of get removed, break away in a flood structure. And then also these like hammocks and swings, so things that are really up off the ground and allow for some gathering and some hanging out, but have that very light touch literally on the ground itself. So that's just starting to kind of get a little bit of that inspiration. These 2 down on the right-hand side are something thinking about that amenity space, the outdoor amenity space by the pond. We can go to the next slide. I think we went into this in pretty great detail. What I'll bring to this is just the background, really, of the master plan. And I think there was such desperation on almost every primary parcel to say, where would daycare go, where would daycare go, where would daycare go? And it is out of desperation, right? And so that was a lot of the basis of this. I think this was considering something bigger, a recreation facility and things like that. And this really was trying to say, you know, where does daycare happen? as we looked at the site plan in general, and again, thinking this is just what we control now, this is really tough. It's totally centered, one, on some of our utility easements, and then two, just in the community itself, right? It doesn't have a lot of access to greater density around it or the larger community. And so that was where we really looked at, hey, what if we quadruple the size of the land and provide for just a lot more flexibility for the town? If daycare is not the right solution, what are a number of other options, that could occur? And this really provided a lot more opportunity for that. And I think that's it.
Yeah, so, thank you. Yeah, so I guess we're just about done here, but, I did want everyone to sort of take a look at this slide here. Obviously, everyone knows what this is from, but it was important for us to let you know that the planning elements of the master plan was a sort of reference point for us. And without going into detail on all these particular points, we would just like to say, please do take a look at our application, and you can read about some of the ideas we've had and ways to address all the different planning elements that were important of the master plan. And then likewise, this being one of the key parcels, gave us a really, really great amount of information to work from when starting to plan this, at the hopes that we could present something to P&Z that was supported and is representative of the community, instead of, oftentimes an architect and developer start with not knowing what the community wants. In this case, we really did have a great frame of reference for that, and we tried to use it to the degree possible and practical. And so I would encourage everyone, as you're looking at our application, to take a look at the master plan again in pages 80 to 86 that go into some great detail on what good ideas exist here and what the community has represented. And then, throwing this slide one more time is a great reference of, how the context of this site ties into the greater community and how it relates with downtown. And basically, at that, we'd just like to say thank you and turn it back over to James, I guess.
Sure, if you could please stop sharing.
Yeah, sure will.
Thank you for that very thorough presentation. I'll take it. Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I guess now, are there questions from the P&Z for the applicants or for staff? Just questions right now. I guess we'll go around. Cindy?
That's a lot to digest. Thanks for the presentation.
Can I ask one question before we get into this?
By all means.
About what we are discussing tonight in relation to the three different things and how that corresponds to what's been outlined. Just, I guess my main question is, there's comments in here about annexation and then development approvals. And there are two different agreements between the applicant and the town. How are these discussion items laid out between annexation and development? Because when we have more leeway with annexation and what we ask for in some of these than in development.
So
it's not clear, I guess, to myself.
right, so annexation is secondary to the initial review process. So we need to get through sketch plan review and move on from there before we can get to the annexation process. So I would be cautious to say one is more lenient than the other because they're intermingled. And the reason they're intermingled is so that the developer doesn't go down a long route on one idea that in the end doesn't get approved, and then they're maybe in the line for getting annexed, but they don't have a development approval, if that makes sense. So you could say, sure, we want to have this piece of property annexed into the town, but then deny them the site plan review approval, and that would be an unfortunate waste of everybody's time. So they're intermingled that way through the town of Basalt. So I would focus on the site plan review right now.
Okay.
Makes sense. Cool. Cindy, back to you.
I do have I do have several questions on the employee housing aspect, which I'll try to save that per the back approvals. But I was curious, so right now, all the employee housing units are proposed as Category 2 in rentals, correct? And then what are the other non-deed restricted units? Are those all for sale, or is it a mix of rental and for sale? The townhomes and the other
The townhomes
units?
will be for sale,
Okay.
and the multifamily will be all rental.
The other units, like the 3-bedroom ones that you showed that are not deed restricted, those will be rental?
Yeah, those will be
Okay.
rental. Yeah.
And then, just a semantics thing. It was a little confusing when I was first reading it about calling the fishing cabins a hotel. Like, maybe I would just call them guest cabins or something on your plan.
We were trying to match the master plan because it refers to it as short-term rental / hotel.
Yeah.
But we try to refer to them as fishing cabins.
Yeah, I just think if somebody's looking at that, it kind of conveys the idea, like, you think of the big hotel that's going up at the tree farm right now, you kind of
Yeah.
picture like huge,
Yeah.
huge building.
It's not that.
So, yeah,
I agree.
just a suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it for now.
Bill?
Yes, I have some questions for you. I know my first question is a little early in the process for this, but for your units that are on the Highway 82 side, do you have plans for additional sound mitigation in terms of higher STC ratings in wall assemblies and window assemblies? Because I've done affordable housing right next to the airport, and that is a huge issue. And there's no real clearly defined guidelines on that. There's some HUD guidelines, but they're weird. But do you have plans for that?
Yeah, that's more granular than we're at the moment with what we have today developed, but I think making sure that that's not overlooked is fundamentally important.
That's where I'm going with this. I just want to make sure
Yeah,
this
no,
is.
I agree, and I think from the buffering of what we can do and what we can get approved through CDOT between Emma Road and 82 is where, that riddle starts. The making sure the glass is of high quality and sort of is a number two, and also using sound isolation clips on the interior is a really good idea for these units, because it is a concern to me as well.
All right. Next question. This is for Heather or Stephanie. Is the area number 24, because I can't really read it on my small screen at the same time as looking at the key, is that number 24 snow storage? I just want to make sure there is snow storage, because.
Yeah,
Probably is.
we have identified snow storage areas.
Yeah, I can't see it at the same time. So
Yeah, we have a number
It is
that
24,
are.
yeah.
It's 24? Okay, good.
Yep.
Because
Integrated into the site. and
I'm
then-
looking at it on a tablet, so it's like, you have this little tiny window.
And then, so some are integrated into the site, and then this is a larger storage area, so some might have to be moved.
Okay, is that, or
No.
will that be a calculated value, or is that just sort of by the seat of the pants?
It's a calculated value.
Okay, good. Let's see, what type of Emma Bike Trail enhancements are you contemplating at the moment? I know that has a lot to do with CDOT, but, I ride that like once a week, so I kind of want to know.
Multi-use trail, so ideally, we would match the size of it as it extends past the property.
Yeah, but are you going to do anything other than what it is now? Because it's just sort of the road.
Yeah, I mean, we want to segregate it from the road.
Okay, so it'd be like grade separated in some way from,
I don't know about grade separated, so we may shoulder attach, we might, right now it's kind of shown as this like more meandering. I think ultimately when we're trying to get our vegetation, that trail in at the size we want, we might just look at Emma Road improvements and then, attach next to that as a trail.
yeah. So it's not just going to be like a stripe down the side of the road.
No.
That's where I was going with that.
Got it.
Let's see. This is for staff. I was wondering for the quote, dogleg parcel, could we see a study of what the usable land area would be under different setback situations, depending on what the zone it winds up being? Because it looks so skinny, you wonder what you could actually do with it.
Yeah, staff can provide that study. Yes.
That would be great. And last question, again, this is for staff. Are there going to be any like 404 or core issues with this parcel?
Well, there are jurisdictional wetlands on the parcel, but the applicants are not proposing to change those wetlands. So that's what kicks in a 404 permit. if
So we don't have
change
to
it.
go anywhere near the core?
You don't have to go into that.
Cool. I'm done with that.
All good? Mr. Levitt?
Thank you. I missed the site visit. Is there going to be any issue with odor from their water treatment plant? Never? Hot summer day?
I've never, that's never crossed my mind, actually.
Rob, it's not lagoons anymore. They
it
retired
fully
the
contained?
lagoons, so it's a package plant.
But it could still vent?
Yeah, but it's not like it was.
Okay.
It smells a lot better.
We didn't smell it on the site, I didn't smell it on the site
Yeah,
visit.
I've never
We've never
detected
smelled
any
it there.
odor there.
Well, when it was lagoons, you could smell it.
Really?
I don't want it to be an issue in 5 years.
Yeah, no,
for
it's fair.
affordable housing. You mentioned a couple times wanting to have recycle as part of the project, but I didn't hear actual commitment that it's going to be part of the project, and it just seems like an ideal place for it.
Sorry, I missed that. There's so much to cover. Right down, just off of the Emma Trail, so you're gonna be pretty
Right.
proximate, where it's, again, not like buried in our site, so,
Right.
The multi-unit?
this little guy, right there. And we're setting up our conversation with them. I just haven't had a chance to get with Mirta, so we'll try to do that before our next meeting.
Is it a hard thing to get, or an easy thing to get, or expensive, or do you guys pay for it, or do we pay for it?
It all depends. It depends on different projects, have different agreements, so we'll just work with those guys on what they're looking for. And hard to get, not necessarily, just kind of needs to be, they're interested in that as part of their plan, they want to service it, they see it as a, a very useful location that's going to have the traffic that they want and that kind of thing. It's not on their current plan, their like overall Basalt plan. So this would be an add to that.
It seems like a great location and a.
Yeah, we hope so. Yep.
And then finally, could you describe a little bit about the glamping tents? Are they fixed structures for 4 months?
Yeah, so the way we're envisioning them currently is that we would have this deck system that we would bring out there, and we'd build it, and it'd be a couple of different pieces. So it'd be elevated about 18 inches off the ground, and then we'd have a tent that sits on top of that.
Canvas?
Canvas,
Like a
yeah.
yurt or?
Double layer for shade protection, so it cools itself. One of our partners actually has some of these in the Catskills, New York. So he has some experience with renting them. People seem to enjoy them if it's done right.
And that was I was gonna follow up. So basically the platform for in October 1st, October 10th, or whatever, you just,
Gone. Everything gone goes to storage, and you don't even know it was there.
You know, I was initially envisioning, people's different colored pup tents of.
Yeah, no, everything would be cohesive, designed really tastefully. It would fit in, and it would fit the landscape really, really well.
Great, that's all I got. Thanks.
Mike, any questions?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about public access, easements, open space. Is now the time to talk about those easements and their placement, or is this kind of, that's farther down the road?
You can ask about them.
Okay.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of infrastructure. You talked about public parking back near the pond. Is there a public right-of-way that goes back there? Or a public access easement? Is
Yes,
that what
so that's a great question, and we are still working out the details. So this would be signed public parking. In an ideal world, and there's a number of reasons for this, it would not be an easement. So an easement is permanent and dedicated. So our hope is that we do this as a little bit more of a license agreement, so it's like a use license. So the town would say, okay, we get to use these trails, and here's what this use license looks like. And there's a number of benefits. One, with like the field fitting of some of the trails and things like that, and allowing those to evolve, it means your use license applies to that use. We can also determine which uses, right, the public has access to. So we kind of have this combination of signage where it would say, hey, here are the public trails, and then some really nice, elegant signage along here, like, oh, you're entering into, the glamping sites, please stay on the trail, that kind of thing. So that's ideal. Now, that said, it may come to where the town and we feel like an easement is more appropriate, or helps secure things in more perpetuity, things like that. So still TBD, and there's a few different ways to do it.
Sounds like you're the resident recycle expert. Will that be electrified recycle? Is that the idea?
I mean, it's a good question. As far as I know, all of their new stations are a combination of both.
Okay. I think those are my, one other question is, when will we see the intersection designs and those concepts?
We're required to have those prior to the next P&Z meeting.
Okay.
And they're just conceptual
Totally.
design.
Okay. That's all I got.
Kyle.
So on item number 2, where it starts addressing the 2 properties and what has to happen between the 2 of them, I guess the first question is, the childcare facility could be anywhere, correct? So they could propose to put it on the other property, or burden the other property with it if they don't build it?
No, but the development that needs to happen, what's outlined for this property needs to happen on this property. And what was outlined for the adjacent property ideally needs to happen on that property.
Ideally, or has to?
It's weird to try to tell things to happen on other people's property.
But the document states both properties together, and so we've combined them, have we not?
Well, we have not, because they're not owned by the same entity.
But we've put restrictions across the entire thing. So the whole site can only have 80
Actually-
to 180.
Kyle, I think the only thing that was combined was the total number of units we proposed. I think they each had different uses on the different properties.
But the total number of units across the entire multiple properties is a certain number.
That was
Yeah.
a certain minimum and maximum, yeah.
It's a good point, because it is confusing, and the neighboring property has this community facility, recreation center, that was idealized for it during the master plan.
I guess I just see that a big place for a rec center would also be a good place for a childcare facility. And it seems like we've lumped the 2 properties together within the same document. So,
No, it
just
makes,
a question.
yeah.
And then I guess to clarify, the 25% affordable, again, is on the same document pertaining to the entire property. So if they build more, does the other property can they build less?
No, because that's in the basis of the land use regulations of housing mitigation. So that's just a standard for housing mitigation for any development.
Okay. It seems like again, this has been looked at as one big property. It's all going to get built out, yet we're looking to burden them with street enhancements based on this design and not what happens if we build even more. Is there any thought to that? And then if we do consider that, would they be able to have something in the agreement that they could have a right that the next developer, if it gets developed, pays a certain percentage of that for Emma Road and any of the other? Because it seems they shouldn't be burdened with the whole cost just because they're the first ones. Up front, they have to pay up front, but they should have the right to potentially be reimbursed by future developers.
Totally see what you're saying. The tricky part here is that we don't know what level that other property will be developed to. If someone will develop 10 units, 30 units, if they'll do the community center or not. So estimating what the impact of the development over there without a land use application is tricky. So we have to assume the worst will happen over there, and they'll have to deal with their own impacts once that gets, a land use application comes in, which may cause further improvements to the intersection or those sorts of things, or it may never get redeveloped. So that's why this property has to have the exactions on it as a standalone.
Okay, so there's no thought of designing a little more in case something gets built.
You can always ask.
Fair enough. In point, or we're still in point 4, I guess, 5. There's talk of asking them to put up financial security to make sure the thoroughfare gets put in.
Mm-hmm.
Again, so we would asking them to burden to pay for another property to ensure that it gets built.
Just a minute.
This is really focused on the traffic mitigation for what they're developing. So
I guess
then,
what have they not built that we'd be asking them to build in the future and asking financial security for? Because it reaches their property line.
Yeah, so this, I would say, is a discussion item for P and Z and ultimately council. That was a recommendation by Jim Charlier, who is kind of the town's third-party traffic engineer that is doing an evaluation of their traffic study. He basically suggested that it might be a good practice to consider whether a financial security should be put up by this applicant to help ensure in the future, if the adjacent property to the east were to redevelop, that road gets put through so that there's multiple ways of egress out of the property for the most part, because he felt it's an important connection in the future if that property redevelops. He's not saying the town has to enact that requirement for putting up security. He just suggests that it's something for consideration to help in the future ensure that connection is made.
Kyle, I would give you a little frame of reference here. There's precedent for this. On the south side, development applications over there pay into an improvement fee for a potential roundabout to mitigate for the level of service issues on that side of the street, side of 82.
Okay. Still confused on that one. I'll leave that one alone. And then on the last question, the discussion about potentially asking for an appraisal on the land and then a financial commitment plus the land potentially, and it's brought up about the $2 million for across the street. Is the potential ask that it would be land plus around that potential cash contribution?
Land plus the cash contribution, right.
Okay.
But we don't know the value.
Right, you don't know the amount,
know
but
the
it could
value
be,
of that
but we have
land.
an example of something else.
It could be a wash, you don't know.
Okay, I guess I would love to see us consider, instead of building more, helping what we have in the pipeline succeed, and could cash go somewhere else instead of building something? Offsetting childcare rents, something different than just sitting on that much money.
And something just to point out, the Stotts Mill is 2.3 times larger from an FAR standpoint than we are. So it's a significantly larger development than us. So we're about 40% of what they built at Stotts Mill, are currently building.
Kyle, good?
Yes, thank you.
No worries. Couple small things, just for my own knowledge. Where is the cutthroat cabin, the larger cabin? Where's that kind of located in that?
The amenity
Yeah.
cabin?
No, not the amenity, the one, the two-story cabin, the bigger one, that is the 5-bedroom. Wasn't there a 5-bedroom cabin?
So
The fishing
I
cabins.
think there's one 3-bedroom, maybe.
One
There's a
3-bedroom?
3-bedroom
Oh,
next to-
3-bedroom. Okay, my bad, 3-bedroom. I misread that. Is the idea with the on-site manager to live in one of the affordable housing units or?
right here.
He,
Oh, so
no,
have a
it's
separate unit.
Standalone.
Okay,
Yep. And it also helps create that separation between the long-term residential and the short-term.
perfect.
Yep.
Like I said, my things are kind of small at this point. I know we'll get into the details down the road. I'm a little confused in my head right now. You're calling them fishing cabins, and yet the design structures make them look like nice little, not what I consider a cabin. So, maybe it's more a comment, 'cause it's not where we're at tonight, is just as it comes forward. I guess maybe I could have saved this for comments, is like, clarifying how we're defining what a cabin is versus, to Cindy's point, a hotel or whatever it's gonna kind of be called. Because to me, those looked a little nicer and fancier than a normal cabin would be in my head. So,
They're going to be, they're
they
going to be
can't,
really
no, don't
nice.
get me
We
wrong,
want
I
them
get
to-
it. I
we
mean,
want them to
as
be
you see
really
the
nice.
Roaring Fork cabins and, I get that, but just,
We want them to be really nice,
No,
fishing cabins.
no,
you know?
that's awesome. I
So
have no
like-
problem with
Like
that.
commercial finishes where when you go in there, you can feel it, you touch it.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to clean, it's easy to maintain. So yeah, but to your point, we'll add more detail to that.
Yeah. I'm just intrigued by that. And then, is the goal, I appreciate the environmental efforts and meeting the green code and things of that. Is the goal to have complete coverage with the solar panels, or is it only going to cover a certain percentage?
That's a good question.
And again, we can have that discussion down the
The
road.
rooftop areas are predominantly going to be used for air-to-air heat exchanges and PV arrays.
Okay,
And the objective would be to understand what your demand is for electrical in the building per the services and number of units, and then start from there and see how much land you have to make available and come
Yeah.
up with a goal after that.
no worries. Like I said, just I don't know if you have a goal of 100% or you'll mitigate as we go forward.
More analysis needed.
Fair enough. Excellent. Any additional questions come up before we?
Can I ask one more?
Yeah.
Could you have fit more density with this layout, or did you guys get kind of blocked out by parking?
It was a combination, yeah, parking was, we probably could have fit more FAR maybe, if we wanted the massing to be larger. But we were trying to hit that balance of the right amount of density. It obviously has to work with the parking, and then we wanted it to look nice for the neighbors on both sides of us, from the highway too. All of that we considered.
And I'd say from a mixed development perspective, if we want to have a mix of types of units and looks of units and size and scale of buildings, which we have here for a community feel, we really have kind of taken full advantage of the opportunity area while having sort of transitional spaces and stepping down spaces. So it feels like the right balance, but it also feels like we're hitting a density that is, pretty much there. Yep.
Thank you.
Michelle, am I wrong that there's a trigger if there were more units? Was 80 the limit before something, the road or payment got triggered?
I think 80 was the trigger for the bridge.
80's the
Bridge,
trigger
okay.
for the bridge and a couple other.
And when they refer to 80, it's important to note that they say 80 residential, so we're actually less than that. We're 68 residential, and then we have the 12 cabins, and it really did just work out to hit that sweet spot of 80.
But you're not building the bridge.
No.
Isn't it 80 minimum that has to be built if the other property was to get developed?
It's a guideline.
But that's different than the bridge scenario.
But if the next property were to be developed and they developed 16 units, they would be on the hook for the bridge. Because that's the way the regulation's written for the bridge, 80 units between both.
That's what the master plan kind of indicates, but as we've kind of discussed in the staff memo, and we can have more analysis on this, the bridge is not working out well.
I think it's important to note that it would be a misconception to think we landed at 68 in order to avoid going over a threshold, because the bridge just has been determined to be.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna get stuck on this, but if the master plan is only a recommendation, how is the childcare have to happen then?
Well, you can certainly, the P and Z could recommend your suggestion. You could get the rest of your board on there to say, you know, I think this is a better alternative, for sure. The master plan is the document that guides them on what is most likely to get approved. But certainly things change over time. For instance, this bridge is really aspirational, but not engineeringly feasible necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
We're good on questions. I'm going to open it for public comment at 7:37. If you have a comment, please come up to the microphone, state your name. Do we want address or anything? You can state your address, that'd be great, and come on up.
Ramsey, can you please stop sharing the screen?
Yes.
So we can see.
My name's Brian Susi, and I currently reside on the stock parcel, right next to where their development is. And what seems to be a perfectly adequate plan, you guys have talked, and it's like we're in the master plan, but we're not ready to sell our property right now. And there hasn't been any discussion of what, I mean, the park and all the stuff there. And I mean, we've lived there before the library went in, before the post office went in, before there was even the road over here. And I just know that all those have had huge impacts on us with people walking their dogs, coming onto our property. I mean, we've had people camping out back. I find feces out there, and I don't know that this camping thing and all this public access back there until we're ready to sell is appropriate. Another thing that I have is nobody's talked about, you've already started raising the property over there, and you have to raise it up, I understand, so that you're not down in the water table. But where's all that extra water gonna go? Because you guys are gonna be higher than us then, and we're gonna have flooding over at our place. I mean, I'm just giving you guys some stuff to consider. I mean, I'm not saying, I mean, eventually we know, but we're not ready to sell our property right now. I mean, we've raised our families there. My wife grew up there, her grandmother settled there, and we've just lived there our whole lives. And we're just, I mean, we know that eventually we're gonna get pushed out. But at this point in time, we're not ready to sell. And I just want you guys to take a look at, you know, because everybody's talking about the plans, but nobody's saying what's gonna happen to us on our side. And that's all I'm looking at is, you know, we're not ready, you know, I mean, I gotta walk out my house and see a 3-story building every day when I'm used to seeing birds and geese and the deer running through. And it looks like to me your buildings are pretty right on the property line. So what's gonna keep people from, you know, standing out on their balconies or coming to the fence? I mean, I know Connor Myers, and he has nothing but problems with all the people that back up to his property, even though they've got fences and all sorts of stuff. And I mean, I haven't seen any plans. We're gonna put up a 8-foot-high privacy fence. You know, we're gonna plant trees on our side, but it doesn't look like to me there's any room for trees. It looks like it's gonna go right up to the property line. And I understand you guys are trying to develop as much as you can, but you gotta take other people into consideration that have been here a long time too. And I just, that's all the comments I have. And, you know, if I could, I'd like to see some kind of plan of, you know, what they're gonna do, you know, to mediate people coming onto our property and what we're gonna do back there. Because I just know how I mean, as soon as the post office was done, people thought my field right there between our house and the post office was a dog park. And they were letting their dogs just run out in my field like crazy. And when I said something to them, I was an asshole. You know, and it's not what it is. It's not a dog park. So just take that into consideration.
Thank you, Brian, appreciate that.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else?
Hi, how's it going? My name is Tyler Stevens. I grew up at 190 Riverside Drive, just up the road. I grew up with these guys, and that's kind of what I like best about it. It's a homegrown development. It's not some outside developer trying to make a buck. It is unfortunate, it kind of leapfrogged one of the parcels that wasn't ready to be developed, and I get that. But I do think they have our values at heart with pushing the density towards the highway, towards the other big buildings. You know, you got 5 stories over by Stubby's, you got Big O across the way. It's kind of inevitable that it grows. You know, the preservation of the riparian area, stuff like that, public access, it's all there. It's not like you're sodding up to the edge of the river, have oily lawnmowers right next to the water, stuff like that. So I think, you know, if it needs to be done, it's got to be done right. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. Any other public comments, please?
My name is David Jones. I'm representing my daughter who's lived in this neighborhood for over 20 years.
I'm just checking with the microphone. You're all good. You're all good.
With the microphone, so make sure they're picking up.
And I want to say that this is a huge issue. The way this is designed and laid out, I think there's a great deal of input, and I speak with the skills that I have in design of developments, albeit a little bit larger, but they all have the same issues to discuss and get taken care of. So I feel that there are a lot of holes that can be patched, but they better be patched. Because we live there and we know what the good, bad, and indifferent are. So I'll see you guys next time.
Thanks, David. Any additional comments at this point? If there are no more comments, we'll close the public hearing at 7:42. Before we get to P and Z discussion, I did one more question for staff. You mentioned that they're tweaking the floodplain with the river board. Is that anything that's going to impact what we're going to be looking at, or the development as a whole, or?
Not at the sketch plan level. If the CWCB were not to adjust the floodplain, then there would have to be some adjustments to the design of the project. But as I noted, Matrix Design had recommended to CWCB that they change that based on modeling, and
Okay.
CWCB is in that process.
Okay.
So
Do we know how long that might be?
it's hard to get a definite answer out of them. They're moving along in the process, and
Okay.
they've had public meetings on the changes to the floodplain here in Basalt. And so we expect it in short order, but can't say for sure.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'll open up for commissioner comments. I guess we'll go the opposite. Kyle, comments?
I think I guess some of the things I take from some of these discussion items is there seems to be a number of fees and just continuation of potentially making this project extremely expensive, yet they've offered to build more deed-restricted housing, but yet I don't see us potentially offering anything back, whether that's reduced fees or something else. I think that's something we should consider, because it's very meaningful to what that is, but we don't seem to be giving back anything. I guess for right now, I know there's a long way to go. That's kind of my only comment for right now.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but this property needs to be rezoned, correct? So that's what we're giving back.
This property would need to, but it's been called for development. It's out in the master plan. It's been established to be one that we want to be developed.
In the master plan, correct?
They're offering more than what the code would require when it gets zoned.
That's fair enough. I do think that they are getting something back, the right to develop the rest of the property.
Fair enough.
I do also think from affordable housing, I think it was 25% of the FAR has to be affordable housing, and you're at 27%. Yeah, the units are much higher than the minimum, but the FAR is kind of right near the minimum. And so I don't know if, you're really going crazy above and beyond, but I think you're in a good place.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah,
No, you can add.
I'll start with, I think you guys have done a good job meeting the master plan, finding a density that works, transitioning it into a natural landscape. I really worry about the pedestrian connections, the trails, the public access, how all that's going to function. I think that bridge in the master plan is something that needs to be examined a little more. I think obviously where it was plopped in the master plan might not work at the moment, not down the line either, but maybe is there a study that can be done that where it does work, it makes that connection for folks. I live in Old Town, and when I have to go to Emma Trail, I got to go through town, which is not very biker friendly, to that intersection at Two Rivers in Midland, and then wrap all the way back around. I end up riding on Two Rivers, to be honest with you, which is not a fun experience either, but it's a quicker, more direct route. So having that bridge and that connection would be, I think, a great benefit to the community. I think the river is a huge benefit to the community, more access to that. So I just think keeping that in mind as we develop this plan is important on my side.
Yeah, in 2016, we did some very preliminary studies to determine the span of the bridge because the abutments have to be outside of the floodway. And so that puts the free span of the bridge 200 to 300 feet long, depending on the alignment you make, which makes it very, very not doable for a project of this size. But if it would be helpful to the P&Z and staff, we can put together an alignment and profile so you could see the footprint and see what it's doing, because the bridge also has to be 4 feet above the BFE as it's going across the river.
So we just want to give a little historical background from the P&Z perspective of the master plan.
I got to say something here. I've had so many discussions about this bridge.
Yes.
Before the master plan started, when we were doing the 404 permit with Matrix and Robert Craybill, and he basically said what you said years ago, that it has to go from floodplain to floodplain and free span. And to build a bridge like that would cost probably more than the entire budget for the town of Basalt. So it's like we have to find a way to make this bridge discussion go away, because it's impossible to do it. It's just physically and monetarily impossible, even though it got stuck in the master plan.
But also remember the master plan discussions, it wasn't the key item that we were talking about with this property. It was something that was, some people wanted it, some people didn't, but we all understood that the cost was going to be
It was a
prohibitive.
mistake to even talk about it during the master plan part. I objected to it then. I was overruled, but it's going to lead us to a point where we get into a bind where, we're going to require someone to do something that is beyond financially unfeasible. That's like a $10 or $20 million bridge to do that. That's like serious money. And just because some guys say, I think it would be nice to get across the river over here. But it's not like you're going to build a little footbridge like in the National Forest. It's not like that.
Nope.
And so I think, we as a town, we shouldn't burden these guys with it. But as a town, we have to find a way to tamp this discussion down in a meaningful way so it doesn't burden other people, because it's just not, it's not practical, it's just not realistic. It's just not something we can do, so.
For tonight, let's just say it's there, it's part of this discussion, but we shouldn't get in the weeds tonight. We're not going to win any battles tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying we should burden this development with it. I think it needs to be examined. Is there a location that works? Has that ever been studied?
We already did that, probably 2 times. So I'm sure there's a document somewhere with that in it.
We can pull up past studies maybe
I
and
would
bring
like
it
to see
to
that.
our attention.
Sure, yeah, we can look at more information for you from.
I think that's One other thing was the water. And you guys are proposing a new well and work with the water department on the location of that well. Is that a self-serving well, or is that for the wider water system, distribution system as well, or?
It'd be for the wider water system, the greater water system. The town has a well plan for future wells, and as part of that plan that was done by SGM, there's a well in the general location specified for the Jadwin parcel. And so it doesn't have to be any specific place, but staff is working with the applicant to make that well reality.
And then on kind of that panhandle parcel that you want to give to the town, looks like a sanitary line kind of runs diagonal on the east side of that property. If we are to build a building, and maybe that's part of that, setback study, does that line need to be relocated, and whose responsibility is that to allow for the town to actually use the full envelope that would be created by setbacks? I think that's another thing I'd like to be considered.
I'm pretty sure that section of the line was abandoned that diagonal section was abandoned when they did the realignment through the parcel. I don't have my drawing to look at, but I haven't focused on that, but I'm pretty sure that was abandoned. We'll confirm that prior to the next meeting.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I think it might be a service line that comes down from the property.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay.
Rob?
We are continuing the public comment until September something?
Correct.
Does that mean we vote at that time?
True.
So we're not voting?
Right, because I think the intention here is to get your comments and for staff to go back and draft conditions of approval, and then to bring those back to you and you can react to those.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
I have some comments to make. First one, I know it is early in the process, but I have some comments about the architectural expression of the project. It seems very plain and simple, edging towards snowmass in the 70s. And I hope we can, I know this is a placeholder for a later part of this, but, and I also understand, with things like IECC 21, that there's a lot of work to do just to meet the energy requirements for the town and the code. And architectural expression tend to fall by the wayside with that. And, but I really hope we can put a little bit more into it than we got. Because, I just don't like to see, Wood Road in 1974. I hope we can get a little better than that. Also, I've talked about this before, but we're sort of on the low side of the master plan amount or density numbers for this parcel. I understand that we're bound by parking and some of the other master plan suggestions. I, for one, were always, during the master plan process, fell more on the side of less parking and more density. And we tend to be in the situation here where our code required parking drives a lot of the density discussions. And now this is my personal opinion, not everyone on P&Z shares this, especially at the time of the master plan, but I don't think parking compliance within the urban growth boundary this close to downtown and as part of what qualifies by HUD standards as a transit-oriented development is strictly necessary. But that's just my personal opinion, but I think it's an item for discussion. I think that there's so many opportunities for multimodal transit on this site that direct parking requirements seem impractical to me. My next point is about gifting the land to the town. I think in theory it's a great idea. I don't think the town has behaved well in the past with land that was gifted to it, especially when it came to the purpose for which it was gifted to them. And I know there's not a whole lot of institutional memory about this, but Jody's laughing, so I think he knows. Especially when you talk about Willets, that certain parcels were gifted to the town for certain purposes, and they never happened because the town needed the cash, and they decided to sell it, and it was like everyone, because the boards change, and everyone sort of forgets why these things were given to us. It's like, oh, we got this property, let's sell it. I don't know if that's a great idea in the long run, but for the purposes of this project, I still support what you guys are doing. But from the town standpoint, we don't have a great track record with that. Let's see. I do want to make a comment that this has nothing to do with what you guys are doing. I think this is a great project. I really do. And I don't want my criticisms to seem like I don't think that. But I do want to say that nothing other than affordable housing that's designated as affordable housing is really to be considered affordable by design any longer in Basalt. You just can't do that. It's a nice thought and it's a good idea, but it's not really. You're not going to have people with jobs living in a lot of these. It will be like, where I live, it's like it's second homeowners everywhere, and it's a regular subdivision. But
I disagree.
I
We have a lot of rental units in Carbondale. Every one of our units, we have workforce housing and workers that actually live here. So that's our goal there.
It's a great
These are
sentiment.
not the type of units where people are going to be moving here to live in Basalt from out of town.
I hope that's
not
the
gonna
case.
happen.
I really honestly do.
Yeah.
But I've been doing multifamily projects here for 30 years, and I just don't see it moving in that direction as time goes on. The affordable housing will be, and it's not your, you shouldn't be burdened with this comment. This is a overarching global comment that really has nothing to do with this project. But I think that what we call affordable by design is rapidly disappearing.
I would just echo, Bill, if you don't mind me just throwing on, because I was going to go there, is, we did end up working with the developers across the street, and they put in certain restrictions as far as how long we want, when they were renting those units out to people who were guaranteed to be here 6 months of the year or lived here for 6 months. I mean, I would echo that those kinds of restrictions might be something to look at to meet your goal.
I agree with that. I wasn't really trying to find a
I'm just
solution.
echoing
That's
that.
actually a good idea. And my last point is I've done a large number of affordable housing projects, and the last couple I've done, the 3 bedrooms were hard to fill. And we were asked to redesign the 3 bedrooms as studios, as 2 or 3 studios, because they couldn't fill them after they were built. And that's not an easy thing to do. So you should just kind of keep that in the back of your mind and try and find out that if for affordable housing, if that bedroom mix is really, really what's operative right now, and that's where you want to go. I don't think the town should say about that, but I think that you guys should build what you can really rent out. So, it's really the old saying, your mileage may vary on that, but in the past, that's been the case the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, no, I think we've taken that into consideration, and again, that's been our goal to provide more family housing, because we know there's a demand for it. And the master plan specifically calls out 1 studios and 3 bedrooms. And the reason is that there's a lot of families that just don't have a place to live. I'm not worried about filling this.
Okay,
I'll tell you that right now.
Good, because
Yeah.
I just finished one for the fire district, and they can't fill them. So, anyway.
Is that deed restricted?
Yeah, deed restricted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about the free market. I was only talking about affordable housing. I'm done.
Cindy, comments?
Yeah, a couple of comments. There's a lot going on at this project in, comparatively not a very big space. So, if it were me proposing this, maybe I would hold off on the glamping thing for the time being, or, it just seems between the residential, the short term, the public access, people coming and going, it'd be hard to, until it's built, it would be hard to tell exactly how much activity is going to be going on there, and traffic and parking, et cetera. My other comment is kind of piggybacking on what Bill said. When I hear about housing that's, going to be attainable now by virtue of its size, yeah, I agree that doesn't work. With Stotts Mill, which is literally in my backyard, I've kept up on all the sales records for that, and there are a lot of units being purchased by out-of-towners, which I assume is going to be for second homes. Or they just saw, oh, we can buy something, lower price than in Aspen and move there. But, so I know that doesn't apply to the actual deed restricted things, and I guess since as you were saying, it's really only the townhouses that are going to be for sale, right? And remind me how many townhouses there are?
12.
12, okay. Yeah, I mean, I just, that's something that I'll keep in mind, that small doesn't guarantee that it's going to be local or kept affordable. So, yeah, that's it for now.
I think this is a good start. I would just echo with the comments we heard before. We're not privy to your discussions with your neighbors, but to obviously include them in some of your planning and thoughts would be great. Be lovely to kind of see that and kind of extend maybe the buffering that you're talking about between the highway. Maybe it can be extended. Something that came out to me tonight. I think obviously there's a lot of things to keep working on and questions about access and the right of ways and things like that would be great. But I think we're off to a start. So in that vein, do we have a motion motion to continue until September 19th?
So moved.
Do we have a second? Bill seconds. Do you want to do a roll call or just vote?
Let's do a roll call. Mike Horvath.
Good with that.
Okay. Cindy Hirschfield.
Yes.
Eric Vozek.
Yes.
Kyle Oberketter.
Yes.
Bill Marin.
Yes.
And Katie is not here. Okay, great. Motion passes. Oh, I'm sorry, Rob. Because you did you made the motion, and so I made a mark on my thing. Apologies, Rob Levitt.
That mark counts as a yes.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So the motion carries, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, you guys.
September 19th.
Should we give a minute to clear?
We're good. But, yeah. Either way.
So that went a little longer, so just to move forward, the next item is a 2024 work program discussion. Is that a staff-led discussion?
It is. And it's great, because I'll move quickly. But I'll have to wait for James to pull up my PowerPoint. So while he's doing that, what I'm going to tell you is I'm going to do a quick once-over of the Green Team, posts, and BPAC's work plans for 2024, which are all very similar. And then we'll review quickly what your work plan was for 23, and then you can tell us if you have certain things. So these are just drafts, and all of the groups that I'm talking about have started talking about their work plans, but none are, maybe posts is finalized, but the rest are still just in draft mode. Okay, so number one. Is Green Team. And so in Green Team, their work plan is broken up into 4 categories: tracking, public education, built environment, and transportation. So when James clicks on the mouse again, they'll get some fun little green check marks if, oh, yay. And these are things that have happened and been completed in 23 for the Green Team. The code updates, the kind of our typical things that happen every year, community recycling events, leaf drop, those sorts of things. clicks on it again, we'll see things that we're still in progress on. We're still trying to define the best ways to measure greenhouse gases and the intervals to do that. This group has been working on alternative transportation, and they will continue to do that through this year and next year, based on Midland Avenue and future Willets Lane plan. And then just really kind of dialing in what and how we're going to achieve or move the community towards this goal of zero waste. So kind of big aspirational things there.
Does the ride Basalt not count as alternative transportation?
Oh, hang on. Next slide. So the other two categories for the green team are built environment standards and transportation alternatives. And so you'll see all these lovely green check marks because you were correct. WeCycle, Basalt Connect, and our e-bike rebates all fall into those things. We got through a lot of our built environment standards. Things we're still working on, the solar capital project being implemented. We had hoped to have that much further along by this time, but we have had a change of horses, AKA contractors throughout the process. Our original contractor didn't work out, and so we've had to switch. So that looks like that project will probably be realized in '24. That's where we've slowed down a little bit, and that's some supply issues and some just the industry right now is a little unpredictable on certain things, and it caught our consultant there. Creating a bigger car charging station infrastructure is on the horizon for '24, and so is this bike charging stations and improved infrastructure, which you'll hear me talk about in the next group, as far as doing a bike-friendly certified community goal. So that's, Green Team is basically just going to continue on with a lot of the green check marks and then hopefully finish some of these yellow check marks. And so one of their things to getting through some of those check marks is pursuing a bike-friendly community certification. That's not just a certification, that's actual infrastructure improvements, bike lanes, improving intersections for bicycles and pedestrians, signage, it's all of these sorts of things. It's a huge, heavy lift, which feels a little bit like a post or parks and open space thing, but it actually, the goal is to get more people riding bikes and using alternative transportation. So that's one of their big things, and it falls under each of their categories as we're going forward. And then maybe as other fun topics is this outreach to HOAs, to encourage HOAs to use our core energy efficient upgrade rebates. So that would be huge.
The infrastructure monies are going through core for improvements?
Going through core for improvements, and actually we just got sent a grant opportunity from the state on going to affordable housing units in particular and supporting them with green initiatives. So we'll be pursuing that. So that's what the green team is sort of looking at. And then we move on to post. Things that post achieved, their work plan is broken into 4 parts: parks, trails, maintenance, and partnerships. And when James clicks on it again, all these cute green arrows. The skate park was finished. The swinging bridge area was upgraded and finished. The whitewater park is almost finished. It might be a little premature to have the green thing on there, but we're close. We had lots of small projects with the Roaring Fork Outdoor Volunteers accomplished. Our financial sustainability plans for the parks is almost complete, and kind of some basic town tree projects have been completed as well.
I like the kid with the balloon. Sorry.
What?
The kid with the balloon is very cute.
Oh, thanks. And then things that are maybe started and that will continue on to 2024 are Cliffs Hillside Park is up on Homestead Drive. It's kind of a tiny corner park. DeRox Park, maintenance, we don't have a plan to do a huge overhaul on that, just some good long-term maintenance for that. Albany Park, we're in some really exciting sketches right now of doing a whole new playground there. So there'll be some updates on that as it gets a little further through post. Midland Avenue, we all know about that project. The intersection at 7-Eleven and the schools connection, hopefully you guys have seen the painted crosswalk as kind of a first step. But we'll be looking to do a lot of temporary installations along there for safety improvements and visibility and slowing down there too. And then this Willets Lane and the wayfinding signage are actually combining into one project, because really whatever happens at Willets Lane will relate to connections and travel back and forth from both sides of town. So they'll be kind of parallel tracking and related at the same time. That's going to get advertised in the next 2 weeks, so we'll see where that goes. But I think work on that won't actually start until 2024.
Is that just signage?
No, it's, so the Willets Lane plan would be part of this, any improvements to achieve that bike-friendly community. Any traffic calming measures we want to implement. BPAC has some ideas too that aren't just for Willets Lane but all around town about maybe there are other places to install art. So you're riding your bike and you kind of get rewarded for being a pedestrian or bike by having these whimsical and fun moments, those sorts of things. But signage is huge because we know there's just not a lot of good signage for people that don't know.
About Willets Lane, you know the raised crosswalks that they use there? They're just a little tiny bit raised. They work perfectly for keeping traffic right at what the speed limit is.
Where do you get that, Bill?
I ride on it all the time.
I walk it every day, and I watch cars fly over it every morning, especially around 7:45 when the mommies are going to school. It doesn't slow people down. You don't see brake lights from behind when they go over them.
I go on it twice a day, and I never see anybody speeding on it. Once in a while, someone speeds on it. Maybe, I don't drive first thing in the morning, though.
That's the school traffic and the early morning construction, but those guys aren't as bad.
During the middle of the day, it's like, it actually really works.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that plan goes and what improvements or adjustments come along that way. But we'll have tons of outreach on that.
Because if you hit it right at 30 miles an hour, you can go right over it.
It's doable,
If
yeah.
you hit it at like 32, all the junk on your dashboard winds up on your lap.
I don't know what you're talking about. Next slide. So just I always like to look at things on a calendar. So some goals here for the Willets Lane plan, for example, is in '24 we might do some temporary installations because of course we don't know what is going to get proposed, if it's going to be millions of dollars or a couple $100,000. But we know we could try some of the things out in '24 and decide if they're successful, we like them or not. That's similar for what we were just talking about at Confluence Park, is the little park at 7-Eleven. So trying some temporary installations there. And then Post will really be working through some of the pedestrian amenities for the streetscape plan as well. And some of these temporary installations, we're doing that so that all of town is not under construction in 2024. So that's Post. We're almost done. BPAC. Oh, they only have one slide. They're so great. Things that they have accomplished so far are programming for the River Park, which has been pretty fun this summer. Hopefully you guys voted in the mural competition that was along Midland Avenue. BPAC has a meeting this week, so then I think some results from that voting will become public. Ice sculptures again. The BPAC grants had the largest number of applications in its history this year. So historically, we've been able to give everybody the full amounts they've asked for. We had to divvy it up because I think we had over a dozen applications. So people want to do stuff here, and it's exciting and very successful, so we'll be looking at modifying that. Things going forward, I mentioned their interest in pursuing some activity in Willets Lane, but really the Willets Lane and the streetscape are part of their overall arts master plan. So we'll be prioritizing locations and sizes and how to get the art and all of these things going forward.
The town art collection, or the donations and.
Yes, and the good thing is I accidentally put Green Team in twice, so we'll go faster and skip right through all of those. The town was recently gifted a long-term donation of a large outdoor sculpture, which BPAC has approved, and it'll be going to town council for final acceptance of it. But we're hoping it'll be the beginning of an art collection for town, where people either donate pieces or we're going to create a consignment program.
Oh, I get it, okay.
Yep.
I was interpreting it as like people bringing cast-off art or whatever, like a collection like that,
Oh.
recycling collection.
And I don't think that's how it's envisioned. Okay, here's you guys. So in '23, we had broken up possible work plan items for you in projects, initiatives, long-range planning, and land use code amendments. So the first click will show the projects, which we know Midland Streetscape is well underway. The other project was the South Side secondary access alternative, and for anybody who doesn't know, future development on South Side could trigger the need for major improvements to the intersection over there. So we've had a study being underway to determine what that looks like, and historically there was a large discussion about like a $25 million underpass, so it's just kind of come around. We have found, do you want to talk about the timing and where we are with that?
Yeah, we've had Sopris Engineering doing some work related to a new traffic study over for all of Southside, basically. If you recall, SGM had done a traffic study for all of Southside in 2016 or 2017, somewhere in there. And so they recommended in that 2016-2017 study that there would need to be some laneage improvements to the intersection of Basalt Avenue and Highway 82, which were made in association with the pedestrian underpass that went in. It also required that there would be a mini roundabout or similar improvement at the Basalt Avenue Cody Lane intersection, and so developers were putting in money towards that improvement. It left in their flexibility for the town to study maybe other improvements in lieu of that roundabout, and in lieu of providing the vehicular underpass, which was kind of always the long-term goal for improving traffic conditions in Southside. And so Sopris Engineering is looking at alternatives to the underpass to get more capacity. And so, kind of generally what they've found, and they're starting to review this with CDOT to see, make sure CDOT agrees with their conclusions, is that the development that's approved in Southside now doesn't actually trigger the mini roundabout. It did trigger the laneage improvements that were made. And so they're also looking at alternatives to the signal light changing and timing and some other alternatives. So hopefully we'll be able to present that to P&Z and council, in short order.
Are they going to do another traffic study in like a year and a half? Because that's when it's really going to be needed, when, when a lot more of those buildings are constructed and people are living back there and the daycares are running. And
There would probably be some sort of ongoing monitoring set up, as there was with the 2017 study, which is why we're kind of looking at it again, revisiting it.
All right, almost there. Initiatives. Things that got done, the Green Team Communications Plan. just to start to create that, a little more awareness of what the Green Team is doing and that culture of sustainability. If you are interested, you should sign up for the newsletter. It's on the Green Team website. It's pretty fun. Economic development in the historic downtown, we've done Midland Money, we've had the mural competition, the concert series, lots of fun stuff there. There could be some other things coming around in ¡24 as we see some some opportunities for grant applications like a historic preservation sort of district or something like that. But things that need to be researched a little bit further. And then the long-range planning, updating the housing guidelines was on your list, as well as we already talked about the Willets Lane and the wayfinding plan. We are under contract and in the middle of working with a consultant who is updating our housing needs study and the income limits. So when that's finished, I'm sure we'll be back and let you know what the updates are on that. And then last but not least, land use code amendments. Amending anything to the affordable housing mitigation probably should be informed by what we find from the updated housing study. And amendments to the environmentally sensitive area are things we're kind of ongoing as we move forward. So that is your work plan from 2023, and we're happy to take anything if you have any ideas that you wanted to see considered, discussed, thought out, researched. Come back and think about it another day when we see you on this 19th, totally fine. But that's everything in a nutshell.
Any initial feedback, or
Wouldn't mind thinking about it and
maybe
chatting
give us
about it
a
next
few
time.
minutes in 2 weeks?
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing I can say now is, I don't know if this exists yet, but I'd love to see some kind of, perhaps a summary from what BAC discusses, or something that's a little more tangible about what our housing needs actually are for affordable housing.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like we're always just assuming and playing a guessing game, but
Yeah.
how much anything's been actually studied, like, ranges what's needed most,
Right.
what kind of people are looking for housing. I don't know if that regional housing group is doing anything like that.
They're working more on policies, but the consultant that's doing our updated needs assessment right now will create that report, so we'll have that available for everybody. Yeah.
Just to add to that, they're just in the beginning part of the study. They're in the data collection piece at the moment. And so after that, they will start to work with Bach to, make recommendations on just what you were asking about.
Yeah, because it would be helpful to have some kind of concrete data to refer to when thinking about things like this.
Who controls or discusses the real estate transfer tax funds? The use of those funds?
Mm-hmm. Well, they're restricted funds, so they have parameters on what they're allowed to be used for. And there are 4 RETAs? 2 RETAs.
No, there's actually maybe 6 or 7 now. And council usually discusses how those revenues are to be used as part of their annual budget conversations.
Did you have a use you were wondering how it's funded or not?
I'm developing 90 units in Durango, and the city is master leasing 30 of our units at free market rates and basically creating an internal voucher program. So then they're subsidizing, they're setting the rents at like 80, 100, 110%, and then they're selecting the tenants, and if they can't afford, they're subsidizing the difference. And they're basically, instead of trying to build their way out of it, they're just looking at what's been built and how to kind of set people up for 2-3 years, and then hopefully they've got ground.
And then they move into the private market.
Hopefully.
Ask Aspen how well that went.
Well, again, but it's a different market, but
That was the original goal of the APJA.
to what?
It was a stopgap, give yourself a couple of years to move into private sector housing, and it never worked. This might be an understatement.
Highlands Villas comes right to mind. People retire in those.
Yeah.
Ownership versus renting, though. You're trying to help. Again, they're not owning these.
They're renting them
Yeah.
below rate.
It's interesting.
It's just different concepts instead of trying to.
Well, I mean, I don't know what our target number is. We'll find out when we get to the study, but just the land constraints here, I don't think we'll ever be on the path to building ourselves out of it, because we just don't have any of the land.
Any additional staff updates?
Yeah, our next meeting will be September 19th, and we'll have Jadwin on again, and there'll also be a minor subdivision application on Original Road, and we do have several other applications in, one for a historic designation of a single-family house and an ADU proposal that P&Z will see shortly, which is exciting, and another one in the industrial park, so starting to get busy on land use applications.
Cool. Additional commissioner comments? If not, motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconds, all in favor? Aye. Meeting is adjourned at 8:27.